Okay, so it seems that more or less everyone has joined at this point. So once again, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Natalia Rejnic-Babic and I'm the head of journal publishing and open science here at IntechOpen, open access publisher. And yes, formally on behalf of the company, I'd like to welcome you to our first webinar on open science. To give you a bit of context, earlier this year, we've started a portfolio of open science journals with the goal to move beyond open access and support the changing needs of our authors. And embracing open science was a natural next step for us here at IntechOpen because open access has been in our DNA since day one. With this series of webinars, we'd like to take you along this journey with us and help you learn more about open science and all of its benefits. And I believe we've chosen the perfect company to do so. So experienced publishers, Dr. Sarah Greaves and Lesley Anson will be leading our first online event. And I'd like to thank both of you for joining us today. And yes, I think that we're ready. So let's start. I'll giving the floor to you, Lesley.
Oh, thank you very much, Natalia. So it's a great pleasure to be here today, and in particular, a great pleasure to introduce you to today's speaker, Dr. Sarah Greaves. So Sarah is an experienced science publisher, having led successful journal launches and other projects in both traditional and new business models. During the 18 years she was at Nature Publishing Group and then Springer Nature, Sarah moved from being an editor at Nature Cell Biology to the Nature Publishing team. She became the Nature publisher in 2007. Since 2010, Sarah has focused exclusively on innovation and new product launches, and she drove the launch of open access titles across the Nature Publishing Group portfolio, including recommended, primary paper pan publisher recommendation service, and also the Shared It initiative. More recently, Sarah was the Chief Publishing Officer at Hindawi, and she now runs her own STEM publishing consultancy. So today, Sarah is going to be introducing us to open science, explaining what it's all about and why it's important. It'll be approximately 30-minute presentation, which will leave us a good 15 minutes for questions and answers at the end. If you have any questions as Sarah's talking, please type them in the Q&A box that you'll be able to see on the presentation in front of you. Please don't use the chat because we may not be able to see them. But yes, as they occur to you, type them into the Q&A box. And what we'll do is we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Sarah to tell us all about it. Welcome, Sarah.
Thanks very much, Lesley. Thank you for the lovely introduction. I'll see you again at the end for the Q&A. So as Lesley said, please type your questions into that Q&A box as we're going through the presentation. And thank you to Natalia and to Lesley for asking me to come along today and speak with you. There's two big broad parts to what we're going to talk about today. One is introducing you to open science, so what it is and what it means and why it's important for you as an author. And then we're going to talk a little bit about those IntechOpen journals that Natalia mentioned right at the beginning of this presentation, and explain to you the types of papers they're publishing and how they're embracing open science, so you as an author or a potential editor can learn more about them. So let's move the slide on. Right, so what is open access? That's that big question that we're trying to answer in this presentation today. And we're going to try and answer what it is. We're going to try and explain why it matters and tell you really what it means for you as an academic and how that has then led on to the development and the launch of the IntechOpen journals. So open science is fundamentally changing how science is done. Now that seems like a great big broad statement to make right at the beginning of a webinar, but it is. Open science is all about the creation of transparent and accessible knowledge. So your academic output, then how that is shared through collaborative networks. Now that's how you share your information with academics around the globe. Now there's a couple of words in that initial sentence that we're going to hear a lot of today. We're going to hear a lot of use of the word open, as you might expect, and a lot of use of the word collaboration, how people work together and how open science is enabling that. So open science isn't just open access. Open access is a very strong global movement now, and it's part of open science, but open science is broader than that. It includes other topics such as open data, and things linked to research metrics and the research integrity of your work. But there's also another part of open science, which is all about those three words at the bottom of the slide: diversity, equity, and inclusion. Open science is driving the increased inclusivity in the academic discourse around the globe and ensuring that academic research can be accessed, used, read, and reproduced in every single academic community around the planet. So those three words we are going to hear a lot more about today as well. So open science, where did it start? Where did it come from? Well, if you look back in the history books, people might say open science started way back in 1665, when the Royal Society launched the first academic journal as we know them now, to really help support scientists disseminate and share their research with not only academics, but with the general public. Now, you might think open science wasn't a term used in 1665, and it wasn't. But what they were doing was opening science up for other people to read it, to reuse it, and to understand it. So the movement that we see now is just a constant evolution of that and how we discuss science and share it with the general public. That's become more and more important as funders, who are funded by the general public, want to share the information that they support from scientists with the wider world. The phrase itself, open science, came much more into our understanding and into publishing literature from about the 1990s onwards. And since then, we've been hearing it discussed more and more. And there's quite a few key things that open science is trying to do. This big global movement, which is trying to increase access to scientific research, which is now supported by lots of individual funding agencies and research institutions. So as you might expect, one of the key aims and goals of open science is openness. It would be very strange if it wasn't there. And this means openness of everything that an academic produces, be that your data, your protocols, your code, your research papers, and your teaching material. So it also includes all educational tools. The second big aim is reproducibility. Allowing others to access your work means it's much more likely that they'll be able to repeat it and say, do I get the same results? Now that's an incredible validation of your work and a great way of increasing the trust, another word we'll come on to, of the scientific output. The third aim is to increase the reliability of science. As above, this is all about increasing the trust and integrity of the results that people are publishing. The next aim is transparency. This means nothing is hidden. Everything that you create, all your results, all your information, is easily available to all to access, to read, to reuse, and to understand. Taken together, those elements that we've just talked about will increase trust in scientific discussion and scientific output, not only with academics, but also with the wider public. So that public availability of data is an incredibly important part of open science and can lead to other initiatives we're going to talk about later, such as open peer review. And the last aim is to increase that knowledge exchange, that collaboration work we mentioned earlier on, aiming to increase collaboration, not just between academics in their same field, but across interdisciplinary fields, and further than that, increasing the exchange and the collaboration into industry and beyond. So those are the main aims. So what specifically does that mean for you if you're an academic and you're publishing under open science rather than just open access? Well, clearly it means your research data is going to be open. That means your research papers, the data behind it, and any other associated information. But it also means more than that. It means any code that you produce, which allows you to analyze your research or your protocols, needs to be open. It also means your protocols need to be open, not hidden away in a database so other academics can read them and aim to repeat your experiments and see if they can validate your results. Open citations is also an important part of open science, creating an open bibliographic way of producing the citations around papers. And I4OC is one of the main movements associated with this. It's also led to the creation of a new type of publication paper called a registered report. This means you can register your report before you've even accessed or created any experiments. So that means when you're writing up your experiment that you're trying to do in the lab, you summarize it and you register that report either online in a database or with a publisher, and some publishers already will host and publish these for you. This is saying before I've even done any work to see if this question or this hypothesis is validated, this is what I'm going to do. You're registering your experiment in a way. And then when you've conducted the experimentation or looked at your hypothesis, you can then write up and publish the paper, often in the same publisher or the same journal which has hosted your registered report. And the publishers will often publish that paper regardless of whether you've validated your original question or not. So negative information is also incredibly important here. It also leads to open methodology. So your methods will need to be open. You'll need to showcase how you did your experiment so others can copy you, leading back to that validation and integrity points that we mentioned earlier. And it will also lead to open peer review. Many journals are now embracing this. That means there's no hidden names. You will know who your peer reviewers are, the editors will know, everyone's names are in the open. Some journals are taking that further and actually doing peer review in the open after publication in some cases. So the paper is viewed as being in scope for the journal, it goes online, and invited peer reviewers can come in and review that in real time so everyone can see the comments and the suggestions made. Some places go further than that and open peer reviews up to anyone in the community who wishes to come in and comment on that paper. So you can begin to see how this creates a network of collaboration and trust aimed at building up the validation and the reproducibility of the results that you are showcasing to the wider community. As mentioned before, it means open educational resources. So if all the data and the information is open, the teaching that you provide can use better resources perhaps, or different information that you weren't aware of. And then those resources can be shared back into the community. And lastly, it means that any software that's developed should be created with open source code so that others can take that original code and develop it further for their own initiatives. So all of this aims to ensure there's no barriers to access to the research as it's published. That means anyone, anywhere in the globe could access information about any piece of scientific content and be able to reuse it or to share it or to extend the research or to develop it further, increasing that inclusivity we talked about earlier and increasing perhaps the pace of research and also the way that different subject areas work together. So why now? Why are we talking about open science now if it's been kind of around since 1665? And why does it really matter? Well, it really matters because there's a lot of rapid change in the publishing industry, partly driven by Coalition S, that group of funders who've come together to support open access, and also by you, the academics. Many of you want to embrace open science and you want to adopt these initiatives called the 4 R's and the FAIR principles. And we're going to come on to what those actually are. So I think the shift in open science has been driven by the community seeing the benefits to openness. So what are the 4 R's that you need to be aware of as an author? These 4 R's have come around from an organization called the Research Data Alliance and closely linked with the FAIR principles that we're going to talk about next. They've been around since about the 1990s. And as you can see, they're words that we've mentioned already today. They're about increasing the reliability of your work, so the trust in it, the reproducibility of your work, so people can repeat it and hopefully get the same results, the reusability of your work, so that anyone can access the information regardless of where they are, and the relevance of your work, so it keeps all your audiences and the wider public up to date with scientific advancements. And the FAIR principles are fairly similar. These were formally defined in 2016 in a paper published in Scientific Data, where a consortium of scientists and organizations got together to write a policy document about what the FAIR principles are. They're easy to remember and hopefully becoming easier to implement. These principles apply to any data, software, code, research output that you produce. And many institutions and organizations now adopt these and help you with data management plans so you can ensure that your content is adhering to FAIR principles. Again, it's words we've mentioned before. So under a FAIR principle publication, your data will be findable. That means anyone can search for it and access it, which means you do need to have very good metadata associated with your work so people can find it. It will mean that your work is accessible. Anyone, anywhere can use it and understand it. It'll be interoperable, meaning that the data can be taken apart and reused in different places. And reusable, we've used that word a lot. Everyone can repeat the experiments that you've done. So those are 2 broadly overlapping sets of aims, but they're all important. And they all come back to some key words that we've heard a lot today about reuse, about openness, and about trust. So we've sort of summarized what open access is and what it means and how you can embrace it. So what is happening out there to make this a huge topic of conversation now in 2022? Well, open science is broadly accepted now and supported across many global institutions, driven in part by Coalition S, but also the UNESCO initiative. So UNESCO recently set out a very ambitious mandate with international standards, which has been adopted by 193 countries, covering both libraries, universities, and publishers, asking them to adhere to open science principles. They've also asked for investment to make this happen, but you can see how perhaps that increased accessibility and diversity of researchers being able to engage with science and the pace at which it can develop has led to UNESCO formally stating that we're behind this and setting those international standards, which have now been adopted by 193 countries. And here we can see some of the organizations that have actively stated they're supporting open science, from that big one we've just mentioned, UNESCO, through to country-specific ones like the African Academy of Sciences, through to CERN, which is a physical sciences research supporter in Europe. There's many organizations that have come out and said the academics we fund must publish under open science aims and ambitions. And alongside that, you see numerous global funders driving support of open science, big ones predominantly, but also some smaller ones, really saying now, if you are funded by us, by Wellcome Trust, by UKRI, by Bill and Melinda Gates, you must adopt those open science principles when you're publishing. But something else has also happened quite dramatically over the last few years. You know, we all know that we've been living through this unique time in history in terms of the global pandemic. But also it's shifted this debate around open science rapidly. So open science has been moving forward since those first journals in 1665, and it's led to open access. And now there's been a discussion of open science. But why now has it accelerated? Well, during the pandemic, there was so much output from academics that needed to be published, from epidemiological studies through to the genome, through to vaccines and treatment development, that academics and publishers embraced open science initiatives around those publications, which led to quicker turnaround times for publications. It led to data being readily available to anyone, anywhere around the globe, which I would personally hypothesize led us to vaccines quicker than we might have seen normally, and treatments quicker than we might have seen normally, but also led to greater understanding of the public health impact because people were able to publish their data and others were able to analyze it. And I think because the community has seen how that openness led to such a rapid increase in how we reacted to one specific issue by embracing open science, that it's now quite hard to say, okay, we're going to take some of those things back. We're not going to have those things going forward in the future. So it's allowed us all to see those benefits in real time that open science can bring. And it's also increased the inclusivity and diversity to the academic discussion. With all the conferences and events going online, such as this one, we can now have people around the globe interacting and discussing and joining in with these conversations. So to summarize, open science, there's many benefits to you as an author by publishing under an open science model. You can lead to greater dissemination of your work, so more people see it and give you recognition for it. It can create more efficiency in the whole pace of academic discovery. Things can move quicker. It will hopefully increase scientific integrity because more people can repeat experiments and validate them. It allows you to increase your network and find academics in different countries that you might not have known about who are actually working on very close fields to yours. It allows that knowledge transfer between different subject areas and different fields, allowing greater connectivity and interdisciplinary research. It can drive innovation, and ultimately it can lead to benefits to society. So open science matters and it's important, and journals are embracing this as they move forward. So it's not just about publishing papers under an open access model. And this sort of ends the first part of our talk and leads me naturally into discussing IntechOpen's journey into open science and the launch of their new journals. So if I just move to the next slide, and just give you a little summary of the journals and how Intech got to this point. As Natalia mentioned right at the beginning, Intech have launched 3 new open science journals earlier this year in March, and they are embracing open science initiatives from the point of launch. Now, why is that important? Well, it's important for IntechOpen because as an open access publisher, they've been embracing open access for years and now wish to move forward and embrace open science. But it also allows them to serve their community and serve areas of rapidly growing interdisciplinary research, some of which really touch upon the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations, where there's increasing work between different fields, aiming to address some of the big questions that we're trying to find answers to in the 21st century, such as climate change, green energy, human health, digital medicine, and the use of robotics and AI in every aspects of our lives. And by fields working more closely together in a more open way, the advancement and the support of those fields will be more rapid. So this is why Intech has launched these journals in these specific fields, because they're really at that cutting edge of interdisciplinary work, and launching them as open science just allows the pace of discovery to move much quicker. As you might expect, these journals are working with a dedicated editor-in-chief and an editorial board. They're working under a single blind peer review process at the moment, and they're working alongside you as editorial board members to help support these journals at launch. And I think this is a wonderful quote from one member of the launch board, from Dr. Jensfeldt, who is a professor of computer science at the Royal Institute of Technology in Sweden. I'm not going to read it all out, but there's parts of this that I really like. The fact that she says a scientific paper represents just the tip of the iceberg with all the research behind it. And I think that's what open science is trying to showcase, the things beneath the tip of the iceberg. And she goes on to say open science can help speed scientific discovery, subsequently having a positive impact on innovation, making it very important to the society of the 21st century. And I think that's a key mission aim of these new journals. So in terms of the journals themselves, as I said, they are embracing open science from point of launch, and they will be developing and enhancing the open science initiatives they have based on feedback from you in the community in terms of what you'd like to see these journals do. But at the heart of it, they're aiming to increase that collaboration and increase that trust in the scientific process. So the journals are publishing under open access, as you might expect, and they're also encouraging and supporting open data with links both to preprint sites and through to data repositories. They're also aiming to showcase open metrics and open impact, provide code under open source and work with open source code providers, link further with open repositories for data storage, and also help develop and showcase open journal notebooks. But all of this is linked to you, the community, and what you would like to see happen. The journals aim to have rapid publication processes and increase that public dissemination and discussion around research. Excuse me. So as an author, the open science journals can increase the impact for your work through better dissemination, better network, increased promotion, and better research exchange. And this really matters for these areas because they are at the forefront of 21st century science. Excuse me a minute. That's better. It's a very warm day here in London. My hay fever's playing up. So this will allow anyone to sort of access and research these journals. I'm going to ask Lesley for a second to go over the next slide. Thank you.
Oops. Sorry, Sarah, I hope you're okay there. Yes, it is, the pollen count is quite high in London today. Yes, so the IntechOpen journals, they're going to continue the efforts to promote your work through their platform and also through social media. So these are very technology focused open science journals, and the portfolio is going to develop as the needs of the research community develops in this area. I think that nicely brings us on to the end of the presentation.
Yeah, thanks.
Sarah,
Lesley.
you okay now?
Yeah, I'm fine. Sorry about that, everyone. I'm a bit croaky, but we'll see how we get on. But I think the key things to bring home was the importance of open science, and then also how that's led to these journals and how they're embracing it to increase the availability of content in these key areas at the forefront of new interdisciplinary fields. And I apologize for my voice at the end, and I would like to thank you for your time, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Sarah. That was an incredible job there towards the end. Yes, thank you very much for all the questions that we've had so far for Sarah. I'm going to give her a couple of minutes just to recover there. If you do have any further questions, please type them in the Q&A box. I'm afraid that the chat box is just, there's too many comments in there for us to really get through. But if you have any specific questions, please type them in the Q&A box. There are some quite specific questions about particular submissions to IntechOpen journals, which we will probably answer online rather than in person. Obviously, Sarah is a guest for today, so won't be able to comment on specific cases, but we will try and get through as many of the other questions as we can. But perhaps, thank you again, Sarah, for your very informative and helpful presentation. Before we open the floor to questions from the audience, I wonder if I could ask a question from my own. UNESCO recently published their recommendation on open science at the end of last year, I believe. And there was a significant focus on open science, equity, inclusivity, diversity. Why does this really matter? Could you tell us a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah, I will aim to do my best. If my voice gives way again, I will mute myself quite quickly. It really matters. I mean, we've seen, as you know, Lesley, over the last 20 years in scientific publishing, the increase in research and development in science in different countries around the globe, and how the sort of diversity of the academic community has increased rapidly. And that is great for in terms of just different thought processes, different ways of approaching problems, different ways of solving the questions that are in front of us. And so increasing that access and diversity in terms of who can read and use the information that is published becomes increasingly important. In a world before open access and open science, content was locked away, and if you didn't have a subscription to specific journals, you couldn't read it, and let alone try and replicate the experiments, let alone try and use the data and the information to further your own research. And as a sort of global community, we're kind of missing a trick there in terms of how quickly we can work together to solve problems in a collaborative way. So by making things more open, you sort of remove that barrier, and anyone anywhere can access that information, which surely is only for the greater good when we're trying to solve huge problems. And like we said, we've seen it in COVID-19. I think it really increased the rate of discovery and discussion because everything was open, not just between scientists in certain countries, but scientists around the globe. So at the heart of open science is ensuring those barriers are removed, that wherever you are, you have access to all the information you might need for your own research, allowing you then to come up with that discovery that changes the debate, and that you can get it published in a journal that is then disseminated out to the wider public. I don't know if you've got any other specific examples you'd like to share related to that or not, Lesley?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's something I'm quite interested in myself, actually, and I think it's maybe important if perhaps we should have a quick chat about what we mean by diversity. I mean, there are some obvious examples of gender diversity, but geographic diversity. You mentioned the global science community, perhaps even neurodiversity. It's I think going to be increasingly important to ensure that we're all involved in the scientific enterprise, because those of us with neurodiversity can, I think, really add to the conversation. I don't know if there's other examples.
Yeah, you solve problems in different ways, and I think the gender diversity one is a critical one. I think we've seen lots of reports during the pandemic of how female academics in particular have been severely impacted by the pandemic in terms of their academic careers. They've predominantly been doing more childcare and juggling more things during the last 2 years than their male counterparts. And there's been research showing more women have left academia over the last couple of years. We're not going to solve that one today, but diversity in the lab and around the world is sort of leveling that playing field in my eyes, meaning that if you're a dedicated academic, whether you're in Colombia or India or Nigeria, or you're in the UK or the US, you have access to the same information, and that your research can be published in the same journals and everyone can read it.
Absolutely, and taking the idea of global diversity a little bit further. One of the questions, in fact, I think a couple of the questions in the Q&A chats are asking about publishing charges for authors from underdeveloped countries, and actually, what are the publishing charges going to be? Sarah, I don't know if that's something you'd like to talk to, or perhaps Natalia.
Yes,
Natalia, do you want to go first?
Sure, I can take this one up. So as I said, we just recently launched, so we published the first papers in March and April, and the fees for all the papers in the launching issue were published free of charge. But going ahead, the article processing charge is going to be £850. We do have a waiver policy in place, but the waiver priority is given to the authors who reside in countries that are classified by the World Bank as low-income economies. In any case, these are resolve case by case. So if you're an author that requires a discount or waiver, it is best to contact us through the journal email, and then we'll discuss it individually.
That's fantastic. I guess there's another question that we could perhaps quickly, I think your answer automatically addresses actually, which is that the suggestion that IntechOpen journals might be predatory, and I think the fact that you're waiving charges, already addresses that issue. This is clearly not the case for IntechOpen journals. But maybe if you could perhaps just take that a little bit further, when will the journals be included in the directory of open access journals, so that that information is out there for everybody? And are there also other ways that we can help our audience to identify predatory journals as well, which is perhaps more a question for Sarah?
Yeah. Who wants to go first? Natalia, you go first, and then I'll do the broader bit.
Yes. Always an interesting topic, always a hot topic. I believe that the topic arises possibly from the past time where a golden open access was frequently wrongly identified as predatory. For us, our focus is on our network, on our authors, on our peer review process, and of course, our results show that our work cannot be classified as predatory by no means. We are members of all relevant associations, COPE, OASPA, and so on. We follow all ethical guidelines to the dot. Our review processes are clearly explained and presented online, so everything is quite transparent. I would just like to add that our community of authors and editors, many of which have joined today, thank you for that, a special shout out to them, are the best answer to the posed question, I would say.
Yeah, thanks, Natalia. And I think in the broader community, as an author, there's things to look out for when you're looking for your journals to submit to. Are the journals indexed in places you would expect to see them indexed? Leslie's mentioned the database of open access journals if it's an open access journal, but you can also look at Scopus, and you can look at Web of Science, and you can look at PubMed. Obviously, new journals can't usually be indexed in those for a while. With Web of Science, it can take a year or two, but journals should be stating that they're making those application processes. You should look to see if the journal is openly displaying their peer review process. What is it? What is the peer review process? What are their guidelines and their policies around everything from the ethics associated with using cell lines or human trials through to how they deal with retractions and corrections, and anything that's in between? Are they looking for plagiarized papers being submitted? Are they checking for image duplication? Their policies on that research ethics and integrity side, again linked to whether the publisher is members of COPE and other organizations. So there's things to look for. A lot of OA publishers have been associated with being a predatory publisher. It happened quite a few years ago, and I think a lot of publishers have learned through that experience in terms of how they interact with the community and the things that they need to be doing going forward to ensure that their peer review process is robust and their policies are in line with industry expectations. As an author, if you're receiving numerous requests to publish in different places that can't be backed up by a journal that looks like it's got a editor-in-chief who's associated with a known university that you can find, that the publisher isn't stating clearly what their peer review process is and isn't being open about their ethics and their policies, then I would have a flag as an author, as in, is this the place I want my work to be published in? There are lists and things you can check online if you want to go that far, but you can normally tell by searching and looking for a publisher's website and reading through their policies and their documentation. Is there anything I've missed, Lesley?
You covered it all, Sarah. Absolutely, that's very comprehensive.
Sorry.
So it's
Natalia, did you want to come in, Natalia? Sorry.
Yes, that was a very detailed and to the point answer. Thank you. I just wanted to add that the journals are in their launching phase, but they have already been submitted to indexing databases. So yes, as soon as we get the results in, we will publish the news on our website. But we are dedicating a lot of thought to indexing and databases, as this is a topic that is important to our authors. And then, of course, subsequently, it is important to us.
Brilliant. So interesting, actually, Sarah, that you mentioned plagiarism, that there was another question early on, actually, around plagiarism. And I suppose with greater openness, perhaps there is a concern in the community that that might present more opportunities for plagiarism. And I wondered if the IntechOpen journals, you know, the focus, whether the focus on innovative technology could maybe help us to deal with such plagiarism and really stamp that out. Is there something you can, anything you can say to help our authors understand that it's really not necessarily a concern?
Yeah, I'll talk more broadly first, and then Natalia talk specifics. So as you rightly said, Lesley, plagiarism is a big issue in the research industry, regardless of whether journals are open access or not. Perhaps open access journals have had more issues more recently than non-open access journals, but it's an issue everywhere. And I think there's unfortunately people within our academic community who wish to subvert the peer review process, and it's our job as publishers and those working within the industry to try and prevent that from happening, to close the gates, to close the doors that allow people to subvert the publishing process. Most publishers, including Intech, use tools and services that are provided by other companies in the research landscape to check for plagiarized text. There's new tools and services coming online to check for image duplication and image manipulation, which will hopefully address some of the bigger issues that you see within plagiarized content. And I think there's another part of this to authors and reviewers. You know, if you're an author and someone contacts you out of the blue to be on your paper, or there's something you're not quite sure about, then don't do that. And if you're a peer reviewer and you see things when you're peer reviewing, you think this image doesn't look right, or this data doesn't seem like it's been duplicated from a different table, you know, you're there to sort of verify and flag those things up. The editor of a journal and the publisher can't catch everything. There's tools and services coming on board all the time, but I think it's also part of the responsibility of the wider community to notice things and flag them up. Natalia, over to you for journal specific things.
Yes, so for us, it's a crucial topic. It's a crucial topic across across the industry. We have procedures in place that help reduce and minimize risks, but I can tell you from the first hand that the problem is not diminishing. If anything else, it's increasing. So anything from citation stacking to image manipulation. So we need to, we have procedures in place that help us detect problems, but I have to say that it would be great to have more softwares developed that could help fight this problem, because sometimes you're kind of left to your own accord by, you know, matching and looking at what the problems might be. For us, the first level of checks are in our internal publishing office, performed by our journal manager. So she's doing a fantastic job here. And she's kind of like the first step. And then once she does the preliminary checks, the paper is sent to section editors who also have to do their checks. So we have multiple level checks to ensure everything goes fine. But I have to say there are a lot of problems there. So it's definitely a topic worth addressing.
Great. I mean, I think we're almost out of time. Maybe we could, I'm looking through all the questions. I think some of them have been answered. Some of them we're just not going to have time for, but maybe we could, there was a question about whether IntechOpen will accept descriptive research, which I believe is qualitative research. So perhaps we could just end on a brief description of the type of articles that the journals will be accepting. So, will you be considering qualitative research? I know you've touched upon registered reports already, Sarah, but presumably research articles. Will there be any review articles? Could you tell us a little more about the kind of content that your readers will be able to expect?
Sure. We're starting basic, let's say, so it's research articles, review articles, and mini reviews. We do have a few news and views published, so we are looking into differentiating the types of articles to bring some more dynamic to the publishing outcome. You've mentioned registered reports. So we see registered reports as a perfect initiative to fight different forms of bias in the publication process. We are not accepting this form of submission yet, but we are looking into that direction, and if everything goes well, we will include that type of research in our journals as well very soon.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's probably all that we have time for. So
answer some of the quick questions by typing. I answered all of them, so apologies if I didn't reply to all of them, but we will be replying to all of them and then sending some feedback back to you post-event. Probably not today, but in the upcoming days. There were also some questions about certificates of attendance. We can provide those and the presentation that as well, but we'll keep you posted on that in upcoming mails post-webinar.
Wonderful. Well, I'd like to thank you again. It's a great privilege to be here. Thank you very much to Sarah for passing on all your wisdom and insight, and for a really interesting and engaging presentation, and for handling the questions so well. I hope you've recovered from
Yeah, I'm good now. It's one of those things you can feel like, oh no, I've taken an antihistamine, but I'm going to start coughing. But I nearly made it. So thank you for your patience, everyone.
Fantastic. Natalia, anything you'd like to add before we finish?
Yes, I'd like to thank you. You've done an amazing job, both of you. Sarah, I'm happy that everything went well. It didn't seem good towards the end. I'm happy that the IntechOpen webinar didn't finish you off. I'd like to thank you, as I said, once again, for all your support, for a wonderful presentation and coordination. And we couldn't be happier to have you lead our very first webinar. And I very much look forward to future webinars.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I think Lesley will just wrap us up, so to speak.
Yeah, well, if yes, as Natalia said, we'll try and get to as many questions as we can and provide them to you. And thank you very much, everybody, for attending today. Bye.
Thank you, everyone, and hope to see you soon.